Let me tell you, if you want a story about political drama, look no further than Thailand in the 20th century. Imagine a country stuck in a 65-year cycle, swinging from military tanks on the streets one minute to massive popular protests demanding democracy the next. It's this incredible story of coups, constitutions, and a constant struggle for power.
So that's the big question, right? How does a country get stuck in a loop like that for so long? What keeps the cycle going again and again and again? Well, to really get it, you have to understand that this isn't a simple two-sided fight. It's a relentless three-way tug of war for the very soul of the country. And here they are, the three main players. This is the absolute core of the conflict. You've got the powerful, entrenched military, you have the revered, deeply respected monarchy, and then you have the people, constantly pushing for change and for their democratic hopes. Pretty much everything that happens from here on out is about these three forces colliding.
Okay, so this whole dynamic, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It was actually sparked by one single event that completely shattered a system that had been in place for centuries. And that event? The 1932 revolution. It set these three forces on an unavoidable collision course. So before 1932, Thailand, which was then called Siam, was an absolute monarchy. The king had total power. But when the Great Depression hit, it rocked the economy and made a lot of people angry and desperate for change. A group of Western-educated civilians and military officers, they called themselves the promoters, saw their chance. They staged a bloodless coup, and boom, just like that, centuries of absolute royal rule were over. But here's where it gets complicated. The revolution was split right down the middle from day one. On one side, you had the civilians, led by Priti Banomyang, who were pushing for a more democratic, almost socialist state. And on the other side, you had the military guys, like Pibun Songkram, who wanted a conservative, nationalist government with the army in charge. This split, this fight, would basically define the next 20 years of Thai politics. And yeah, for a long time, it was the military faction that came out on top. As the Cold War started to heat up around the world, Thailand entered what we can call the Age of Generals. This was an era where the military became the dominant force in politics, and they really started to shape the nation in their own image. You have to give them this. The military government was incredibly pragmatic. During World War II, the Prime Minister, Pibun, officially sided with Japan, mostly to protect Thailand's independence. But at the same time, a huge secret resistance network called the Free Thai Movement, actually led by his old rival Priti, was working with the Allies. It was this brilliant double game that let Thailand come out of the war on the winning side. After the war, the military just tightened its grip, and one man, Field Marshal Surit Tonerant, basically wrote the playbook for this new era of dictatorship. His method was a masterclass in consolidating power. Step 1, become best friends with the United States. He positioned Thailand as a key anti-communist ally, and in return, got billions in aid. Step 2, bring the monarchy back to this sacred, untouchable status, using its prestige to make military rule seem legitimate. And step 3, rule with an absolute iron fist. But here's the thing. You can only suppress the will of the people for so long. By the early 1970s, that third force, the people, began to push back. And they pushed back hard. What followed was, without a doubt, one of the most dramatic decades in all of Thai history.
And this wasn't some small protest either. We're talking massive. In October of 1973, student-led demonstrations against the military dictatorship just exploded. 500,000 people. Just picture that. 500,000 people flooded the streets of Bangkok. It was a popular uprising on a scale the country had never, ever seen before. The whole standoff only ended when the king himself stepped in and ordered the top military leaders into exile. This kicked off this brief, beautiful, really hopeful period of freedom that's now known as the Democratic Blossom. And for a moment, it truly felt like the people had finally won. But that hope, it didn't last. Just 3 years later, in 1976, fears about communism and political chaos led to a horrifically violent backlash. Right-wing paramilitaries and police stormed Thammasat University, and they brutally murdered student protesters. This massacre was then used as the excuse for the military to seize power all over again, violently crushing that democratic experiment. So after the absolute trauma of the 1970s, it was pretty clear that extremism on either side just wasn't working. So the 1980s became this period of searching for a middle ground, a new way to balance the military's power with the people's demand for a real voice in their own government. And the result was this uniquely Thai solution they called semi-democracy, which was pioneered by a general named Prem Tinsalananda. The idea was basically a hybrid system. The people got to elect their parliament, but the prime minister was a non-elected military general who everyone trusted. And you know what? For a while, it actually worked. This compromise brought stability, it helped end a long-running communist insurgency, and it kicked off an incredible period of economic growth. But of course, the military tried to take back full control one last time. In 1991, another coup. Then in 92, the coup leader broke a promise he made and appointed himself prime minister. This time, Bangkok's growing middle class just had enough. They poured into the streets in what became known as Black May. And after a violent crackdown, the king intervened on live television, forcing the general to resign in this absolutely stunning public moment.
That showdown in 1992, that was a huge turning point. But believe it or not, it took one more major shock to the system to finally create an unstoppable demand for real, fundamental change. And that led to the most democratic reforms the country had ever seen. So after all this, after decades of this back and forth, what was the final straw? What could possibly be the thing that finally forced a deep, systemic overhaul of the entire political system? It wasn't another protest. It wasn't another coup. The final trigger was a complete economic collapse. The 1997 Asian financial crisis started right there in Thailand, and it didn't just hurt people's wallets. It exposed all the deep-seated corruption of the old system for everyone to see. And suddenly, everybody was demanding a fresh start.
The result of all that demand was the 1997 People's Constitution, and it really earned its name. I mean, it was drafted with more public input than ever before. It created powerful new checks on power, things like an independent election commission and a constitutional court. Its entire purpose was to finally build a stable democracy, one that was free from military interference.
So this was it. This was seen as the pinnacle of Thai democracy, the hopeful end to a 65-year struggle. It was designed from the ground up to stop that cycle of coups and constitutions once and for all. The biggest question of all was, would it be enough to finally work?